Bom, bom dia, falou, meu nome é Maurício, somos sócios da SPS Activity, que é uma consultoria, e eu sou um dos líderes da prática de tecnologia e cybersecurity. Então, queria agradecer o convite, eu vou estar fazendo mediação aqui desse debate, e peço a vocês, qualquer pergunta que vocês tenham, pode levantar a mão, vai estar circulando um microfone para vocês. Quiserem também fazer perguntas em português, a gente tenta passar para eles em inglês. Chamar o Leonardo também, se for convocado, por favor. Tem um assento sobre o bom, então, queria começar com uma pergunta que, bom, vou passar para inglês aqui, tá? I'd like to start with a question to Michael. I think you said you put your perspective on what you expect from companies, of cybersecurity companies, for Twitter and the other companies you work for, in the, let's say, the technology, the solution side. But I think that you are also making a bet in some of these companies that the VCs are bringing in. So how do you make the decision besides the technical solution?
Yeah, so the technical solution is a big part of it, because at the end of the day, results matter. But the other thing that matters a lot is their willingness to engage and accept feedback in new directions. I'll tell you, there was an email security company that I was working with, and I will leave their name out. And they were presenting the information of what they did. We did a demo. It was interesting. They had some stuff that provided some value. But we told them, like, what we really want is this. And we described it to them. And said, oh, okay, we'll put that on the roadmap. And, a few weeks went by, and, we asked about it. And, and it became apparent that they had no interest in building it. And eventually we said, that's what we really want. So if you don't want to put that in your product, we don't want your product, and we will build it ourselves. And that's what we did. And so security is, well, I don't have to say it is challenging, but it's challenging from both technology and from a workflow perspective and what matters. And so the ability to be flexible and understand how to connect systems together and how to take feature requests, those are pretty core items that I look for. And also I look for a security knowledge and awareness in the team. Do they have a reasonable perspective on security, or are they, like I mentioned before, running around looking at headlines and using buzzwords? That's always a concern if they're in that camp. So I'd say the flexibility of new features and the general security acumen are the biggest things outside of technology.
You guys, on the other side, let's say, you said you have, Blake, you have some software engineers in your company, on the other side, looking for from the investment side to the technology side, how do you make this selection besides, buzzwords and seeing, okay, this is the trend? Do you have like a partnership with this company or technology companies to test it, and how do you do it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for us to analyze thousands and thousands of companies per year all over the world, it is important to select our channels of focus. And predominantly, we are, at the moment, about 50% or so of our deal flow comes through Y Combinator programs. So it's a nice pre-vetting process in itself right there. But that's not the only channel. It's not to say that Y Combinator is the best of the best. They're very good at what they do, but we still need to conduct our diligence above and beyond that. And we partner with a lot of other firms. There's 500 startups where we get our deal flow from as well. There's incubators and accelerator programs all over the world. We work with some up in Canada that we've done probably 20 or 30 deals from. But more importantly, when we go through our diligence process, it's somewhat algorithmic at the very top level of the funnel, and that helps us kind of bubble up the top 10% of the companies that we should really spend time and focus on. And our minimum qualifying criteria for a technology company itself vary within the different subsectors of technology. So you can't have a set algorithm, and also, as it was indicated today, technology changes on a daily basis. So we have to have hands-on at some point. We can't just have it, set it and forget it, and assume an algorithm is going to work all the way through the process. So our venture team will get involved hands-on and work with the founders, create a profile to post in front of our panel members, and we'll leverage our network effect of those 18, 19,000 members that we have worldwide. We've handpicked and cherry-picked about 300 of them with certain expertise in the field of technology, whether it be virtual reality, augmented reality. We actually have a panel member that is a lead engineer at Oculus Rift, the virtual reality headset. He's one of our panel members, in addition to the other 299 panel members that give us support, leverage, hands-on experience as part of our diligence process. Instead of outsourcing to a consultant at high cost with a very general knowledge of technology space, we want somebody who's really focused on the specific subsector of technology, that live this day in, day out, can ask the right questions, know the right players, where the loopholes are. And that's an important part of our panel process and diligence process. Above and beyond that, we're looking at, it has to have a full-time tech member on the team. You can't have a technology company run by MBAs, and that's just not something that makes sense for us. It has to be a massive TAM, in terms of the market today or 3 to 5 years from now. It needs to be multi-billion-dollar companies. We're not just looking for something that could exit in a couple of years. We want the next Airbnb, we want the next Uber, and that's what we go for. So we spend a lot of time going through that process, and our team will spend about 5 to 7 hours on average with founders before we decide to give them the final thumbs up and approval rate. And we get to know, we get into their dashboards. We need Michael on the team, but we get into their dashboards and verify and validate all of the information and the data that they've sent to us. Initially, we conduct standard due diligence, contacting their clients, getting reference checks, everything that a standard VC would do, all the way through the end of the approval process. But in terms of being able to leverage our internal team, we have engineers that are also tapping into their systems and making it very, very efficient. And if we see any inefficiencies, we'll actually help create products for our startups like chatbots and bots and other tools and other ways that they can leverage it at no cost and help scale the company. So we had a lot of value there, but it's all collected by data in that diligence process.
You have let's say a smaller, company, venture capital, not in value, but I think in number of staff. How is your process of understanding the technology and checking if it's going to be a success or not?
Yeah, so one big difference, I guess, between our strategies here is that we invest in a much smaller number of companies. We invest in about 2 per year, whereas you guys, I think, invest in what, 50 a year? Or?
50 to 51 and a half companies per year.
51 and a half. That's pretty close. So our process looks quite a bit different. I think the top of our funnel is probably similar in that we've got hundreds of companies entering at the top of the funnel, right? And actually, our intellectual property, our proprietary systems in-house that we have are all about that top of the funnel, all about making sure that we know about every single founding team within Israel. Another difference, Blake is looking at the whole world for deal flow. We're looking at just one tiny little place, Israel. But we have 100,000 engineers in Israel that might come up with potential companies for us. We're tracking all those 100,000 in a legal way, but we're making sure we know exactly what they're doing, and when they're coming, when they're getting ready to form companies, we know that through social networks and other means. We reach out to them. So 65% of our deal flow actually doesn't originate on the outside; it originates in our office. We reach out to the companies. We call them, we email them, we message them. Try to make sure we know what they're doing. So on the top of the funnel, we have a huge number of startups. Right? We have, in 2016, we logged 295 companies into our database. For a company to get into our database, it's got to be relevant. It can't be a B2C company because we invest only in B2B. It's got to be within our sector. So 295 relevant companies. How many investments did we make last year? 1, right? So way under 1% of our deal flow actually gets investment. So we use a lot of automation at the top of the funnel to basically get from those 295 to 150. I don't remember the exact numbers at the various points, but that comes all the way down to a couple dozen or so that we have to conduct really deep due diligence on, right? And the deep due diligence that we do, that is mostly manual work, right? That is us calling people like Michael. In our case, cybersecurity is a big sector. And we say, Michael, how about you spend, and that's just an example, of course. We've got 6 venture advisors on the security side, and we've got about 10 times that many CISO contacts, Chief Information Security Officers, so close to 100 of those guys. So I'll email Michael and I'll say, Michael, I found this interesting technology in Israel. It went through all these steps of our funnel, so it's probably good, but we'd like to introduce this company to you, for you to meet with the company either physically or through an online meeting, such as GoToMeeting, WebEx, or Zoom, or whatever. Spend 40-50 minutes with the company. Let them tell you their pitch. Ask some questions, and please provide us with your feedback. And if you can, also provide the company with feedback so that they can get better and improve, towards the next reference call. And we're very fortunate that we have a lot of really great relationships with these target customers, not just customers, like end customers like Twitter, but also potential acquirers of our portfolio companies. So, the semantics of the world that are gonna maybe buy these companies 3-4 years down the road. So we conduct about a dozen of these calls over a span of less than 1 week. And so you can imagine how much feedback we're getting from these end customers and potential partners, potential acquirers, analysts, about these companies. So the very end of our funnel, the bottom of our funnel, is tedious manual work, hard work, thoughtful work, a teamwork effort. It's me, it's the rest of my team, we're all working on this at the bottom of the funnel. And we look for all the things that every investor looks for, right? I'd say 80% of our decision is the jockey rather than the horse. We always say this, we're betting on people. As early stage investors, there's not much to look at as a business. You don't have financials, there's no revenues, there's no signed up customers. It's really a few guys, hopefully girls as well. We're working on that. But as a comment, all of our entrepreneurs so far have been men. We'd love to see more women. But anyway, it's the entrepreneurs, it's the idea, it's the total addressable market, the market they're going after, the market problem they're solving, but it really is mostly about the people. So aside of the introductions to all the target customers and potential acquirers, etc., we're also doing 10 to 12 calls per founder, and those calls are done in Israel with people that have worked with the founder in the army or in various jobs, to get a 360-degree view of that founder. Trust me, after you do 10 to 12 calls of people who have worked with a person, you know very well whether you're talking about an A player or a mediocre person or even a bad person, in case they've done some, anything bad in their career. And all of that is tedious manual work. There's no automation in this, and that's basically how we get to our investment decision.
Leonardo, I'd like to know, now that you are established in the Silicon Valley and you are part of the investment, let's say, circle here in Brazil, what are the main differences between investing, let's say, in technology startups here in Brazil and doing the same in the US?
The first topic that you would think of would be liquidity, because there's a main difference between the American entrepreneur and the Brazilian, is that the Americans make the calculations for the next round. And here in Brazil, you never know when will be the next round. So the first thing that you think here in Brazil, and I'll tell you that I think in some ways it's healthy, because as we don't know here in Brazil when will be the next round, so the entrepreneur thinks about processes, thinks about like having efficiency in the company, thinks about something that is quite weird in Silicon Valley, break-even point. So we always started a company here in Brazil thinking about going to profit. So you have to try to be as efficient as you can to perform on that. So that's the main difference that you can see in terms of entrepreneurs here and in the United States. But the liquidity would be, in terms of the investment environment, one of the key points compared to the United States, because we have very good people here. They would be successful in the United States as well. But the environment here is not as rich as the United States in this sense, and that's why I strongly believe that this market should be more developed here. One thing that we thought in Joa before going to the United States to build this fund was that we should go and raise a fund for Joa, because we performed in more than 10 times invested capital in 5 years. So we thought, like, the guys that were performing the best returns should go and raise the funds. As soon as you have 100 million reais or 200 million reais in a fund, the other guys would follow, other people would start investing on that. And then, in the end of the day, you have some other players here. Joa was not an open player in this field, was always closed to a few investors. But you have other players here that are important as well. They would be able to raise bigger funds as well. And then you have like 1 billion in the ecosystem as a whole. And then this game would start to change. That's the thing that we had in mind.
I think we have a question.
Thank you. I'm a corporate lawyer, and maybe continue what Leonardo was saying. Don't you think that there's a difference in terms of size of investment from venture capital in US and Brazil? Like, for example, the minimum tickets of the international funds sometimes are too high to our startups here, even in early investments. So many times I see international funds trying to reach companies here and companies trying to reach the international funds, but they don't get together because of the minimum tickets of the international. I think that what is maybe, it's my perception, I would like to know if it's correct, that the size of venture capital here in Brazil is much lower.
I think that the main drive for, I would say, portfolio manager or these venture capitalists anywhere in the world is return. So if you have good returns on the map, they would come. You adapt yourself. For instance, when we decided to go to the United States, we have to readapt ourselves to this new market and the way that we should act. For instance, here in Brazil, we have a very good advisor who is the main stockholder of one of the top private equity firms in Brazil, and he said, "Oh, you guys are very close to the mainstream here in Brazil. Actually, with all these people that you have around, you guys are the mainstream here." So the best returns that we had in our lives here came from ideas, and then we could get attract the best talents, raise the capital that we needed, and make the right partnerships for these companies. Just like if you have to go to the biggest bank in the country or to Coca-Cola, we have the accesses and we could build up something with the companies here. When we went to the United States, we said, "Oh, we don't have these assets here. So maybe we go more, a little bit later stage, we will co-invest with the right players and start doing our business like that." The same for them. If it's like, if you are the Series A investor in United States and the tickets are too low here, maybe you should go a little bit later on the stage of the company and you can write down $1 million or $5 million check. And there are some American investors that are performing very well in this field here. I know specifically one guy who is doing that and putting like $5 million check in Brazilian companies, and he's performing very well. Maybe they will have to adapt their strategy to play in the Brazilian field. And then this a little bit early stage or earlier in the curve should be done by the local players.
Okay, thank you.
We have other questions from the audience?
Question for Twitter. You guys own third-party data, very important third-party data for marketing tech ecosystem. How do you balance opening your company for this environment with cybersecurity?
I think I got most of that question. You're talking about balancing security risks with third-party business relationships, is that right?
A lot of companies use your data as third-party data for marketing technology industry. So how do you balance in your strategy opening your company, because you got probably revenues from that, from having to have cybersecurity on the other side, which close your company?
Okay. Yeah. So I think that in terms of the balancing from a business perspective and revenue, I'm not the money maker. I'm protecting the money from getting stolen. So I'll talk about the security and the risk elements of it. And one of the big items that we need to think about with third-party relationships that leverage Twitter information is what user data is being involved in that transaction. And it's both a exploration factually, like these pieces of data, but also it is a more ephemeral topic with the users of, does it meet user expectation? If you explained it to a user, would they be surprised? And I think that's an area that we, in all of technology, are a little hand-wavy with, meaning people sign, click agreements to these different things, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily read it, and it also doesn't mean that you can go and do whatever you want, because there's still this element of, if you surprise a user with how you're handling their data, regardless of your legal right to do that, there may be repercussions. So I look at it from the two avenues of, from a technical perspective, we have to make sure our systems are only providing the information they're intended to. And if a piece of data is supposed to be anonymized, that the algorithms are working to properly anonymize those, and you can't de-anonymize that data. That the systems can't be broken into to access more things that you should be. And then third, I work with some of our policy teams to make sure that the expectations of users are being met, that we are not surprising them with what we're doing with information, which gets back to the element of trust.
I'd like to make a question for every single one of you. So it's the same question, but you can all answer it. What is the most, in these days, what is the most, let's say, disruptive technology that you can come across during the last 2 or 3 years that you think it's gonna really make a difference in our lives in the future?
I'm the youngest one in Silicon Valley, so you guys have contact with many others, but I'll tell you that in our case, we have a natural knowledge, because all the partners involved are more, have a background in fintech or in the financial sector. So we are seeing a lot of disruptive things coming in this field, and especially as I told you, in the insurance is something that they're doing such a bad work on that, especially in the healthcare insurance. So I think there's a lot of things that can be very disruptive on that. And I've been talking to an investor in a big healthcare insurance company, and they are facing some problems with this regulatory stuff. But the way that they integrated such a lot of things, as from telehealth, digital prescription, would be like e-commerce, that you can directly go to the prescription goes to the pharmacy, and then you have the delivery just like Postmate and some others that could be integrated, and you receive your medicine, and all of that is doing in a few hours. So, and if you see in the traditional market, in insurance, health insurance, it's done in days, and people are spending a lot of time that they could save with technology. So I'm seeing a lot of disruptive things in this field.
So in the last 2-3 years, you said, I'd say without a doubt, hands down, all the technologies that enable self-driving cars. That will have the most impact on our life in the future out of anything I've seen in the last 2-3 years. Now, investing in this area is not simple, okay? Making money out of investments in this area is even harder. So, you know, it's tough work for us. It's hard. It's a challenge to find an opportunity, one opportunity, say, for our next fund that would end up making money for us. But in the last 6 months, we've had a chance through relationships with Uber and Auto and GM and Ford and Google to really take a really good look at these technologies. And they're amazing, you know, from computer vision through machine learning, artificial intelligence, big data, you know. You got Uber, for example, clocking and recording, I don't know how many miles per day, I think it's in the millions, if I'm not mistaken. Google, same thing, you know, all the data that's going into improving these algorithms and these learning systems, right? True AI. This is really the culmination or the result of, I'd say, 5-6 decades of work, from IBM Watson through everything that we've done in AI, as a race, human beings. I mean, it's really now basically all being channeled, or a lot of it is being channeled at solving this problem of replacing the human driver with a machine. Once that is accomplished, that is completely going to change the world. One of the biggest changes is going to be productivity. All of a sudden, society gains 30% productivity because we spend so much time behind the wheel, on the road, doing nothing, but controlling our car and stop and go traffic, and it's completely useless, right? So productivity. Another example, our children, handicapped people, the blind, older people being able to be shuttled around in their cities in driverless cars. The economics are going to be phenomenal. So getting from point A to point B is going to be much cheaper than driving a car or taking a taxi or taking an Uber or even taking a bus. Driverless technologies can go into the public transportation, like buses, trains, airplanes, you name it. So this will change the world. And this will be also the biggest opportunity, I think, in the next 20 years in terms of value creation, and also in terms of creating returns for investors. Again, I'm saying it's challenging. It's not like you can just start spraying and praying on a bunch of self-driving car companies. You got to pick maybe one out of 50 or 60 that you see. But if I had to put I'm putting my money on it.
That's pretty well said. So that would have been another item that I would put into disruption over the next 10, 20 years is autonomous vehicles. Since you all already talked about that, I'm not going to go there because I have a few that I personally like myself. But before jumping into that, we've already found an autonomous vehicle. It's actually a truck. It's called Embark, and it is fascinating. Right now, it is the only autonomous vehicle or company that's not currently in a lawsuit, and so we're proud of that. It's driving on roads, it's switching lanes, and this is a semi-truck. This is 18-wheeler without a single person in the vehicle, passing on a highway lane back and forth, and you can watch the video online. It's pretty fascinating. But again, that was another company that we saw. We got in early. We just released some information on it, which is why I can talk about it right now, but it's pretty fascinating. So I do too believe that. I spend a lot of time in Uber, on airplanes, and I think all of that can be automated and we'll all be a lot more efficient. But going on to a different part of the world that I think I'm personally a little bit more used to is blockchain technology. I think that is going to be another disruption for all areas, legal, medical, financial, insurance. It's going to solve a lot of problems. It's going to solve a lot of trust issues. We're going to be able to work with cryptocurrencies and cross-border transactions. And I think ultimately, once we nail that down, it's a very simple ledger process. It's not really disruptive in any way. It's just we finally kind of figured that out a little bit late. So I think once we embed that into all of the societies together, it will collect the entire world as one. I think that'll really drive us forward.
So a lot of the items discussed so far are very user forward. You get to see the benefits directly of what's happening. The item that I would speak to is actually cloud. And the reason is that the first wave of cloud was all about the ability to quickly innovate. But what we're seeing now is that the cloud vendors, the Amazon, the Google, they are far more secure than any company is going to be. Maybe not any, but we can just do any asterisks. So the fact that we have this rapid innovation, can you imagine a company coming to you and say, yeah, our data center is a bunch of servers we purchased and have in a garage? Like nobody is innovating with hardware that they own. Everybody's using the cloud. And so imagine these companies that are coming up, they've got 12 people and they suddenly have 1 million users. Security is going to be a challenge, period. They have 12 people. But on top of cloud, the security is being built in. When I talked about scale and speed, the best thing of all of those is just to have security by default. And so I'm really excited with what those companies are doing and that being inherited into anyone that uses them. So I think that the back-end technology that enables all of this innovation, none of these systems would work without the infrastructure behind it. So I don't put my money in it, but I would say cloud.
I have a question to you.
Could you comment a bit about the use of facial biometrics as opposed to the ordinary passwords or stuff like this in the cybersecurity world?
Yeah, so authentication is one of the biggest challenges, as I was talking about. Biometrics is an interesting exploration into doing authentication. Academically, it can be one of three things. Something you know, which is a password, which we know doesn't work very well. Something you have, which can be like a token or a code that you get sent on your phone. Or the third factor, something you are, which is biometrics. One of the things that makes me nervous about biometrics is when your password is stolen, what do you do?
Change password.
Cool. When your fingerprint is stolen, what do you do? And here's one of the challenges. Now, you can design your systems to handle that most of the time, but I am fearful that we're going to run into problems in that space. And then the other part of it for biometrics outside of the security benefits of authentication is the downstream impacts. Right now there's some interesting court cases in the US over what protection do you have over supplying the password to your device versus supplying your fingerprint to unlock the device. And from a legal perspective, you have different rights in terms of invasion of privacy, police right to investigate. And I'm concerned what that could mean for other elements of biometrics from that angle. I'm also concerned about larger tracking efforts and invasions on privacy as we continue to evolve facial recognition. I mean, the reality will be here very soon that every person in every part of the world could be tracked and monitored from their face. That is a scary reality, and I don't know if I want to recommend innovation in that space for the authentication challenge with those types of impacts.
Hi, I would like to know what is your opinion for what came first to develop a good startup ecosystem in different countries, if it is the angel investment ecosystem or the venture capital, and about the investments that you did, how many of them they have angel investors backing up the entrepreneur?
I'll go ahead and start with that, and I think just to clarify, what's the best path to go as a startup? Best path, to be honest, is to bootstrap it as long as you can, and not give up equity if at all possible. But that, in reality, is very, very challenging if you want to scale a company. Initially, where we get in as a company, we're not the first money in. So we are late seed stage. So we're actually after the friends and family money, after the angel money. We have possibly some revenue to look at. We definitely have traction. We have a lot of data that we can pull and monitor. So we wouldn't be the first money in. So recommendation, there's a variety of equity crowdfunding type sites. That's not us. We're a venture capital firm, but we might look and feel like a similar equity crowdfunding type site. That they will be the first money in. So you could do a combination of angels with friends and family. It's predominantly where most people start. Look at some of those equity crowdfunding type sites. Although I'd be a little bit hesitant on raising capital there for a variety of reasons, and I won't go into too much detail here. I'm happy to talk with you afterwards. But after you've built enough momentum and traction, then you get into the early stage venture capital firms. And we're global, so I mean, it is difficult for certain areas of the world to access venture capital and good partners for that matter, not just any capital, because capital is a commodity. And if you're a good founder, you can wait for good capital and good partners. And so we can find you, or you can get referred to us or other VC partners. But once we find you, if we're the seed money in, one of the benefits is, I think on the slides there, I didn't update it, it's actually about $40 after our most recent Series D round with Instacart. It's actually about $40 for every dollar that we invest. So there's a ton of value add, and we partner you up with the later stage VCs, Series A, Series B, Series D, and so on, to help you get brand recognition, help you get known, and in addition to all the other value add you have. But starting with friends and family, angel money, once you're getting into that late seed or Series A, then you want to get pretty strong institutional early stage VCs.
So I think you said it all, not much more to add, but I would say that at every point in time, whenever you're raising money, even at the very, very early stages, you want to try to find the smartest money possible, right? So sometimes I recommend against family money or money from friends. I mean, this is in a healthy ecosystem where there are choices, right? So if you've got choices and you can access professional investors that are really going to do a lot for you, they're going to end up delivering a lot more value than just the cash that you get wired from their bank account, right? That's the goal. And I think you were asking about ecosystem. Were you asking about how to build ecosystems?
Yeah. What's most important to build this?
What's most important to build ecosystems? Okay. So, I mean, I've seen a lot of ecosystems around the world, obviously. I have a lot of experience in Silicon Valley and in Israel, but I've seen other ecosystems around the world. I've been visiting and talking and listening. I would say something amazing happened in Israel, I think in the early 90s or maybe even late 80s, something called Yozma. So if you guys want to Google that, it's YOZMA. And what it is, it was a government incentive program for VCs. Okay, the government basically gave away money to about 10 VCs to get started and really funded their first venture capital funds. think it was about 15 or 20 million dollars per VC in total, and there were about 10 of them. And that is the single out of every, when you look at Israel as a startup nation, when you map back to that program, Yozma, that is the single, that is the program that gets credited the most with creating that ecosystem. Because that, I mean, you can trace everything back to Yozma. You can trace all the financings that these funds did. You can trace all the entrepreneurs that have been formed and backed. And then a huge service provider ecosystem. There's hundreds of lawyers in the country that know everything about venture capital. They understand all the terms in the term sheet. They can negotiate. They can help build these companies. Accountants, marketers, just any type of service provider you can imagine. And then obviously also all the people that have been hired, right? All the jobs that have been created and all the expertise that is all surrounding startups. So you map all that back to this single government program, which is kind of interesting that a public sector initiative, right, spawned this huge ecosystem. Then Singapore is also, has learned from this and then is trying to do the same thing, other places in the world. But an ecosystem is really tough to create, right? Because it's a certain critical mass. It's a critical mass. It's thousands of people that are trained, that know a certain subject matter related to venture and to startups. It's very hard to replicate. And there are all kinds of places in the world that have started, that are at various different stages. In the U.S., you've got at least 10 cities, 10 markets that are at very high level of maturity, right? So that's it. There's also sorts of things you can do. But I think in terms of what's the single biggest thing that can be done is actually the government actually getting something started to motivate a whole bunch of people to create things, and that creates an ecosystem.
Just adding to what you have said, we had a huge discussion about that. It was 3 years ago, that was the presidential elections, and not talking about political parties, I don't have any political preferences, but I discussed with one of the candidates, and I helped to write down a policy for the next government, and actually it was brought to the government that won the elections as well, and on top of the government incentives, the government has to think about the friendly regulations to have the entrepreneurship developed, because it's quite tough in a country that you have a lot of regulations and it takes like 100 days to open a company, and if you fail, it can pursue you for many years in your life. So you see a lot of guys that in successful entrepreneurs in the United States that they say, oh, this guy went to bankruptcy 2 times before he scored a big company. Here it's not possible for you to fail, so it's something that the government has to pay attention. So on top of giving incentives, you have to create the right environment for that. So having friends and family is a natural thing, because people that know you, know the potential of the things that you can do, and they will give you the first money. But to have perpetuate your company, you have to have the money flowing from other sources as well, and you have to have good regulation to encourage other people, to encourage professional investors to do the next step.
Hey everybody, unfortunately the time is up. Maybe closing, please.
Queria agradecer a presença de todos vocês e já convidá-los para o segundo Brain Talks, que eu espero que todos estejam presentes. Muito obrigado.
Now.